Yeah, epic. So, guys, we're here to talk about building art on Bitcoin. So it's pretty great. I think a lot of us have been super happy that there's this Bitcoin village here, and Ordinals, I think, has been a lot of the talk of like the wider NFT world, and I think one of the major reasons why I guess people are passionate about it is that effectively an ordinal is a way of storing data on Bitcoin, and it seems, and I think probably what we're going to try and unpack in this panel is it effectively sort of a great home for art clearly has to be data being stored on Bitcoin forever. So I'm here with these 4 amazing projects. Snooptoshi will be here shortly. But Jay, really keen to dig into like the amazing kind of art, real world art jewelry that you're making available. Like what is it you're doing at JRNE and why? Kind of.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, okay. Yeah, so for those that don't know me, I'm JD the jeweler. I'm the founder of JRNE, which is a Web3 jewelry brand that aims to build a jewelry brand that's fully on-chain. So we tell people, we source directly from gemstone mines, make everything ourselves in our factories in Hong Kong, and put RFID chips in our jewelry so people know exactly what they're getting and where everything is sourced from. And we made the switch to Bitcoin like about a year ago, and it's just been the best decision we've made. It's the best way to prove provenance, where you actually own parts of Bitcoin and link it to luxury assets like jewelry. We've just launched our Ordinals collection last month. It's called Dominions by JRNE, where we're supercharging the growth of our jewelry brand JRNE. But yeah, that's kind of that's our take of luxury and art and why it deserves to be on the mother chain.
And so Leo, obviously, like this is your home conference. It seems everyone's liking you guiding them around. But you've had a busy few weeks, busy year, busy 2 years, kind of thing. How are you feeling? Obviously, you've launched the stones that are upstairs. We helped inscribe that. That's kind of a cool one, right? So.
Yes, first of all, I would like to say thank you to everyone for being here today. I'm so happy because I am French, and this is a massive event happening in Paris, in my hometown, so I'm so happy to have all of you here and see many of my friends in the room as well. I am a marble sculptor. I do marble sculptures for 20 years, going to Italia, finding the block of marble, doing the handmade details on it. It takes time, and I have always been amazed by the long-term historical aspect of an object. When I go to museums like the Louvre and I look at these classical sculptures from 2,000 years ago, I feel in emotion with the fact that we still have this kind of existing human part of something from the past. And when I discovered these Bitcoin Ordinals inscriptions 2 years ago, it was meaningful because then you can inscribe data on chain. It means that the blockchain that basically might remain forever could host some files, some data. And, I do marble block sculpting and blockchain inscription. And to me, it's the same meaning. It's inscribing things for the future, in between the past and the future. That's the way I like to define my art. So yes, I had the chance to design the Runestone last year. That has been a massive airdrop to many Ordinals holders, and it became this kind of iconic stone on chain. And because I love stones and I love long-term inscription and 3D files and heavy things, I decided to inscribe all the stones from the real life to the blockchain. So it's a 45 megabyte of inscriptions on chain of stones, thanks to Ordinal Bot and all the amazing dev tech that helps me to do that. So I'm very happy to welcome you at the Ordinal Village if you have any question after the speech. And I'm happy to be here with all of you in Paris.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. Actually, all of you in your different ways are kind of treating Bitcoin as a canvas. But it's great that we have kind of Billy sitting next to Leo. Obviously, you're on your home turf, Leo. But Billy, it, kind of what you're doing on Bitcoin, you're really kind of diving into what makes Bitcoin work. What's your sort of thinking as an artist in how you approach Bitcoin?
Yeah, what's up, everyone? I'm Billy, generative artist on Bitcoin. Pretty much just been a long-term Bitcoiner, and when Ordinals came out, I pretty much jumped on it on day one, and it's crazy that it's been 2 years. Shout out to Bitcoin Puppets. It's great to hear from Hills in that panel before, but no, it's awesome to have a presence here. Ordinals are officially dead again. I love how there's just a million obituaries, just like Bitcoin itself, but for me, it's kind of a no-brainer to build on the largest blockchain. It's not even close at this point. You know, you're talking $2 trillion versus, you know, 100 billion. But yeah, speaking about permanence and, you know, what is really permanent? You know, we had these LA fires on the West Coast, and you see like valuable art burning up and like property being destroyed. And when I think about kind of long-term, the only thing that makes sense to me really is, you know, tokenizing things on Bitcoin. You know, I used to put work on Ethereum because that's kind of where people were collecting, made a ton of friends, collectors, and you know, I've tried to bring that community with me on that journey. But yeah, it's always been a no-brainer for me from day one when we're talking about permanence. Like, I really do believe I'm going to be, you know, giving my children my Bitcoin, and it's really cool that we have the ability to tokenize assets on Bitcoin.
Yeah, and obviously Snooptoshi as well, one of the most experimental people in all of Bitcoin, which is a pretty experimental canvas. So, Snoop, what are you working on lately? It's always something different.
Thank you. Yeah. Huge fan of Bitcoin. I think if anyone isn't bullish enough on Bitcoin yet, they probably don't quite get it. I've come from ETH, I've come from other chains. I sort of have a huge love for blockchain in general, but when I saw the potentials of what Bitcoin introduced, the solutions to the problems we saw in the previous cycles, it became an absolute no-brainer. I'm passionate about emerging tech. I've been building pretty cool tech for the past 10, 15 years with companies like NVIDIA and Samsung and Mattel, but over the past 3 years, I've put my focus entirely into Web3. As I see this as a place that you can not only create a new kind of content on a new medium that people have never seen before, but it's also done in a way that solves so many of these issues that we saw on the previous cycles. And I'm sure if all of you check your ETH wallets now, probably 30% of your NFTs are just going to be dead IPFS links. You know, I could talk about endlessly the benefits of immutable storage, but the grand scheme of things is Bitcoin is now allowing anyone to store data somewhere for anyone else to view for the rest of time. That's a really powerful thing. It doesn't need to be an image. It could be anything, because ultimately you can store 350 kilobytes of code onto a Satoshi, onto the base denomination of a Bitcoin. That code can do whatever you want it to, and you don't have the means to link these ordinals, these inscriptions together. When ordinal theory came out, the ability to effectively identify these Satoshis that then have data appended to them, that's where things get really interesting, because you effectively have the world's largest hard drive that anyone can use. And that's awesome, because it's censorship resistant. You know, you can't take anything down once it's up there. And with that, yes, you can do some very cool artwork, and I'm seeing some incredible generative art coming out, but what I'm really fascinated in is what the killer app for Ordinals is going to be, because I believe it will be something interactive. You know, the example I like to give is you look at the Chromie squiggle. You know, you're buying an output of a generative algorithm. But on an Ordinal, you could have a generative algorithm as the Ordinal, and you could use, let's say, the inscription ID as the seed. So you would effectively have a piece of generative art that could give you an infinite amount of unique pieces that wouldn't be replicatable by any other of the same ordinals that uses that same algorithm. So the rabbit hole goes really deep. I haven't even started talking about special sats, which is yet another thing I absolutely adore. But there's so much to this that I feel 2021 was a great testbed to start understanding what blockchain is and how it can be used. Ordinal theory and Bitcoin is the thing that will stand the test of time. And so I personally have been building hardware. We partnered with NVIDIA 4 years ago. We've been building a little Web3 games console. I'll give you a demo if anyone wants to see it later on. And most recently, we inscribed an operating system onto Bitcoin called Ordos. If you go to btc.ordos.io, you'll get directly taken to the Ordinal, which is an 8 megabyte operating system. There's everything from PlayStation emulators, Blender clones, Photoshop, you name it, all inscribed on chain, all available for anyone to use for free for the rest of the time. It's a censorship-resistant immutable OS. So these are the ways that you can use Bitcoin, like well beyond what you can use an NFT for. And that is what I find so fascinating about Bitcoin. Like we're barely even scratching the surface. I can go, but I'll stop.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Like I can listen to all of you speak for hours, which is amazing, right? But the Billy, I think Snoop obviously touched on some pretty interesting elements of Bitcoin as a time chain, and I know that in a number of your generative works, you really kind of, I guess, uncovered Ordinals as a time chain, Bitcoin as a time chain. I know there's a lot of kind of heavy rare sats collectors in this panel kind of thing. Like we're all like really believing, I guess, like the chronology of Bitcoin and how data is stored is important. But I think in your artwork, you've really kind of, I guess, put that on display in a way that's quite smart. So I'd love to.
Yeah, like Snoop was saying, having code on chain, it's really powerful. You can kind of, I have a project where you inscribe on a rare sat, and it basically pulls that sat number, and it runs it through the algorithm, and it creates the art. And there's a lot of unique properties, Bitcoin in general, just using the UTXO model versus the ETH accounting model. It's just really, it's a really interesting system. It's like you give the cashier $10 and then you get change, and that's kind of how UTXOs work. And you can use that to the advantage. And the protocol is constantly updating, and it's cool to have endpoints that are really robust for generative art. I had a one-of-one sell at Sotheby's, and basically the artwork changed every 10 minutes with, new Bitcoin blocks. And there's just a lot of capabilities there that are specific and unique to Bitcoin that you can't have anywhere else. One of my favorite things is, being able to tokenize data all in the same system. That's pretty fascinating to me. I think if you were going to design, the best NFT system, it wouldn't be like, we'll put the art over here and then we'll tokenize it over here. To me, it would be in the same system. And I got to applaud Casey Rodamore for that. It's just kind of a really elegant solution. I'm surprised it didn't come out sooner, but I was kind of expecting that, and happy that it's an option. I think Chartfu was also posting like some of his NFTs are returning like some 404s, and sometimes we only think in like 2 to 3 year increments. I think, did Zagabond say that Zuki's only 3 years old? I like to think more in like decades and generations, and I'm sure Leo does as well.
Yeah, and a perfect segue to Leo, really. I was marveling at like all your, like you should all go and check out the sculptures that Leo has on display, because they're pretty amazing, and very thought provoking, right? Like because essentially, we're all here talking about the permanence of Bitcoin and why almost like we I think most of us here typically think of like the ordinal as the perfect kind of manifestation of what the NFT should be. Snoop obviously talks to these broken IPFS links. That clearly isn't what an NFT should be. If it can break, then that's not permanent. But clearly a difficult debate here. But Leo, I really like what you've been doing with, I guess, leaning into stones and the physicality of things that are very, very old, and what does it mean in a Bitcoin context?
Yes, I always like to make a comparison in between the physical art history and the digital art, the Bitcoin art. Basically, when something new happened, when a new movement arrived, like the Impressionism, for example, at the 1 century ago, it takes like 2 decades usually to start to be accepted by the art world and to become valuable. And Bitcoin is obviously, ordinal inscription is, to me, obviously the best canvas for art, because you have this exact provenance system with the child and parent inscriptions. And maybe in a few decades we don't realize that yet, but you will have an art piece with a perfect provenance record from the artist creators to all the holders into maybe a museum or a foundation or something. And this is something very challenging in physical art. When you look at the Greek antiquities, for example, the sculptures from 2,000 years ago, we don't even know who is the sculptor, where does it come from, and it's a challenge for museums to have this provenance system, narrative. Maybe in a few decades, the Bitcoin inscription, this Ordinals inscription, will be the modern archaeology of the digital files of the 2000, and we will still have a pure provenance system on them. So I like to look further in more the same way, like decades and years, and see that we are still very early. The market does its things up and down, but as artists and builders, it's important to have a vision. And I want to fit with this long-term vision that I do have. I do marble sculpting. I go to Italy, I find the block of marble, I bring them back to Paris. It takes months to carve. Difficulties long-term. This is the best way to do art because it pushes yourself to give the best that you can do. Also because Bitcoin inscription is hard to do. This is not easy. You have to face some challenge in terms of data size, in terms of dev. And I think as an artist, it's a fantastic way to inscribe something valuable for the future.
Yeah, it's fascinating, like in terms of, and it seems the way you talk about art in a Parisian context is sort of perfect to sort of, like, I think that's one thing that I think all of us building on Bitcoin we can do is really use it as a canvas to elevate what we do. Jay, I'm always fascinated by whatever jewelry you're showing that you're putting on chain, and just for context, like Jay can basically help people if you've got your PFP, you can turn it into an ordinal of your favorite collection, like the Pizza Ninjas or the Node Monks or whatever it is. What made you come up with the way of your concept of doing it? And I think it's been quite influential. What inspired you?
Yeah, I think it's got to do with like how much we and the entire JRNE team believes in building with IPs, right? Like we've got Pizza Ninjas, No Monkeys, Puppets, and all these amazing people own these amazing assets, and it's almost their identity, right? And when they get a chance to actualize it into something physical, it just helps them express express their digital identity in real life even better. And I think it's just really cool, right? Because you own a digital asset and you have ownership over it, and then when you get to see it how it might look like in person, it's just a different feeling. I think I probably would have stopped doing what I do a long time ago, but I saw the joy that people get when they hold their Node Monkey or their Pizza Ninja in real life. I think it's just a different feeling, but it just makes it all that much more sense on Bitcoin, right? Because for my family's been working with some of the biggest luxury brands and jewelry brands in the world for the past 30 years. And 3 or 4 years ago, these brands started asking them, hey, where do you get your stones from? Where does your gold come from? And the way the jewelry industry works is very asymmetric and no one really knows. That's kind of how this entire concept came about. And then we tried to figure out a way, but then it just made so much sense to kind of source everything directly, make everything ourselves, and then now what do you do with it, right? You've got a piece of jewelry, you might have a digital certificate. How do you link them? You link them through RFID chips inside the jewelry. And then you take a next step where you, instead of putting that certificate on Ethereum or Solana or any other chain where NFTs are hosted through a server, you put it on Bitcoin where it's actually permanent. It's a part of Bitcoin. Like the clientele that we serve, they're not so much concerned with how cheap something can be or if it's a bit more efficient. They care about security and they care about owning that provenance. So it just makes all that much more sense to keep everything on Bitcoin. and it's been quite well. We just sold a piece with Sarbakongs about 3 months ago, and we inscribed the first pendant on Bitcoin, and we inscribed a certificate of authenticity certified by IGI and JRNE, us, and we linked that certificate on to the pendant. So now that whoever owns that pendant can always just tap on it and show the permanence of what they've bought and know exactly where everything is coming from.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I had someone at this event describe what you're doing as the ultimate degen flex. So it's, which I think is kind of, I'll forever think of that when I think of you.
I feel like a lot of people just complain about the friction to like building and creating on Bitcoin, but I feel like it pushed me to be more creative and find solutions. Like early on, a lot of my artist friends were like, what can I do with 400 kilobytes? Or like, do I have to work with a miner and pay a lot to get an entire block? And still that's only 4 megabytes. But it kind of pushed me to kind of look at things differently. So with like recursion, I have this piece, I put a 16,000 by 16,000 piece of artwork on chain, and it's 256 megapixels by inscribing 400 inscriptions and then basically stitching them back together with code. So I would have never done that if there wasn't kind of a challenge that kind of pushed me into that. But I'm curious to hear some of your guys' thoughts on like maybe some of the barrier to entry and just some of the friction involved. I mean, you work with stone, like that's a ton of friction. Like you have to carve into marble. Like you can't make, a dime without pressure type of thing.
Yeah, basically, I'm not sure that I do have the most common point of view on that, but I like friction. I like the fact that it's not easy. It costs a lot to do a 4 megabyte inscription of a full block because scarcity once again comes from limitation, and I think that especially in digital art we need scarcity and we need friction and difficulty because it enhances the long-term rarity and the long-term scarcity. But yes, it's a challenge, and obviously if you work on, it's the same way as an artist when you do a one piece for a museum or an edition of prints for a more open wide market, then I think we need different blockchain to know different use case of the art creation. But if you do art for the long run, for the long term, I do like this friction and Bitcoin inscription things here.
Yeah, and obviously like code is super lightweight, so Bitcoin is like perfect for generative art. And Snoop, I mean, you put like an operating system. Like, what's your experience with like just building on Bitcoin? Like, what would you tell someone who's kind of curious but feel like, it's like I got to learn all this and do all this? Like, what would you say?
Thank you. So again, Bitcoin, it's a wonderful beast because the time we're currently in, I like to call this sort of golden age of being able to put data on chain. Now, there are a few things to take into account. Whenever you're putting any data on chain, you need to know the size of the file, how many of the files, what the network rate's going to be, and that ultimately tells you how much you're going to have to pay to put that data somewhere that anyone can see it for the rest of the time. Now, Bitcoin's price is going to go up. This is the beauty of a finite supply. And so I think we probably only have 5 to 10 years of time where it's feasible for people to be able to put data on chain before it just gets too expensive for the majority of the people, as we're currently able to now. And touching on the friction, I think friction's a wonderful thing because friction keeps out the people who are not serious enough. And if you're able to overcome that friction, then you have sort of unprecedented insight into nascent technology that has already proven to be one of the most stable assets the world has ever seen. It's taken 10 years to become the 6th largest asset in the world. And so to me, the writing's on the wall. And so there are limitations, yes, but necessity is the driver of innovation. And so this recursion, we've talked about it, just to sort of add a little more context to it, the idea is you don't need to put data on chain twice if you don't want to. If someone's put some data on chain, a library, let's say, or some tools or something that you may want to leverage, once it's on chain, you can simply point to it, which means you then don't need to spend your extra money putting that same data on chain twice. And so as Bitcoin grows, as people start to understand more what can be done, and as libraries start getting added, complex libraries that allow you to do some very cool stuff like WebRTC and P5.js and all of this stuff, Bitcoin becomes greater than the sum of its parts, and the artists themselves are able to create an entirely new caliber of content. And this will just continue to grow. And I think we have this Goldilocks age of probably 5 to 10 years where anything you can think of can be done. You know, Brufstar says very, very popularly, you know, that the internet's powered by JavaScript, and ultimately this is what we're building here. You know, you can do a huge amount with JavaScript code on chain. And so, yes, there are limitations, but you know, there were limitations 30 years ago when The Legend of Zelda came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System, one of the best games ever made. That was 200 kilobytes. You know, you could easily fit that on one sat. And that wasn't a problem. That was still some historic content that many people will now fondly remember for the rest of time. So this, to me, is sort of another way of, yes, there's friction, yes, there's issues, yes, there's cost, and there's a million reasons not to do this, but there's 2 million reasons in order to do it. And I think you've got to find that friction, and when there is friction and you can overcome it, then you're in a position to do stuff that no one's ever done before. And so don't shy away from it. I think we've all, I'm assuming everyone in here has been in NFTs in some way, shape, or form, so we've all seen the shortcomings and the positives of both sides. And so a new cycle has come around, new technology has been introduced that is superior to the previous round. So like, don't buy an ICO in 2017, buy an IEO. You know, this is exactly the same thing. Don't buy NFTs in this cycle when you know the next cycle is going to be pushed primarily by Bitcoin. And so I think really Bitcoin is the key, the solution, and the answer to everything. It doesn't matter that there are limitations, those limitations disappear gradually, and if not, you know, we'll find ways to overcome them.
And in spite of those limitations, do you think that sort of Bitcoin art kind of takes over like most of digital art, or do you think it becomes that niche with as an interesting canvas with those limitations? Like, what's your...
For now, I think it's open. It's open for anyone. I think in 5 to 10 years, it's going to be very, very niche. But nonetheless, I think this is the time that anyone is able to use it. And the only reason stopping you is you not figuring it out. And it's not that complex to figure out. It really isn't. You know, like we look at an ecosystem like XRP, Ripple, been around 10, 13 years, however long it's been around. They've got a whole NFT ecosystem. They've got one wallet. Bitcoin's been around, Ordinals been around for what, 2 years? We've got 4 incredible wallets with mobile support, with like infrastructure, with tooling being added constantly. Like to me, I love emerging tech, and all of the builders left the other chains a while ago. They're all, the real builders are all building on Bitcoin at the moment. And that's why we're seeing such stagnation in a lot of these other chains, because yeah, it's fun. That's old tech. You know, now there's a whole new cycle has started, a whole new piece of technology is available to us, and now it's down to the innovators to figure out how to use it. And again, it's really down to some amazing people that are in this community, people you can reach out to and talk to who are changing Bitcoin as we know it today. So it's, yeah, hats off to Casey, hats off to the team, to the people who've been able to create what we're now experiencing. So, giga bullish.
I find it absolutely hilarious that there was an OpenSea employee wearing a Puppets hat earlier with no intention of ordinal support in the future. Sorry to put you on blast, brother.
And so I think Ed briefly kind of touched on that we might be heading towards a kind of hyper-Bitcoinization in 10 years or whatever. What actually does that do if God, like Bitcoin's at $1 million plus, right? Like what does it do for people collecting art? Does it just become harder? Does it become more exclusive? Is that an issue for people? Like we want Bitcoin to be for everyone, right? Like as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Udi on this point where it's just kind of a high-end luxury chain. I think if you can afford it, like you should store it on Bitcoin. I'm not saying you shouldn't put work anywhere else or projects. I think with every chain, there's just trade-offs. There always has been. You know, if you want speed and a little bit of centralization, you're sacrificing some decentralization. You know, I use Solana. Sure, why not? Like, so I feel like there's always trade-offs, and yeah, I mean, if the same people who are like, oh, well, rare sats, I don't really see the value prop. It's like you think Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million, and then like assets on Bitcoin won't be more valuable. I mean, it's the same kind of scarcity model. I mean, we all agree, like it has value because we all agree it has value. No difference with, you know, anything else in the world. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of my thesis. So like going forward, if you expect big things, it's hard to say, well, assets on Bitcoin will not, you know, appreciate.
Yeah. So you've heard it. If you care about luxury, if you care about high value, definitely, and you care about permanence, think very heavily about Bitcoin. It's been an amazing panel. I'd love. I think Snoop wants a final word.
I just wanted to say,
Yeah.
if you care about your children, buy some Bitcoin.
Further. Yeah.
Sure.